Box office predictions are here for Brie Larson's The Marvels, and they are predicting that it is going to have one of, if not the worst, box office grosses for the Marvel Cinematic Universe ever. Let's get into this here. New opening weekend box office predictions have been revealed for Marvel Studios' upcoming The Marvels film, and it claims the film will make less than box office loser Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and could claim the spot for not just the lowest opening weekend in Marvel Cinematic Universe history, but the lowest grossing MCU film overall. Box Office Pro shared their projections for The Marvels, claiming the film will only gross between $50 million and $75 million in its domestic opening weekend. They also predict it will bring in between $121 million and $189 million at the box office. You can see the predictions right there on X. 50 to 75 million opening forecast range for the opening weekend, 121 to 189 for the domestic total forecast range. So these predictions are far lower than their initial long-range predictions for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania earlier this year. They initially predicted that film would gross between $96 million and $131 million in its opening weekend domestically and go on to earn between $249 and $347 million in its entire domestic run. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania eventually had an opening weekend of $106.1 million, way lower than, I guess it was a little bit higher than their low end there. 10 million more than their low end there, but way lower than their high end. But their total domestic would only earn $214 million, significantly lower than their low end there of $249. Overall, the film grossed $463.6 million globally. Given Quantumania's estimated production budget of $200 million, the movie lost at least around $22 million. It's probably more because the production budget was actually probably higher, as we've come to find out. Almost all of these Disney production films have way higher production budgets than what initial estimates are. So it's quite likely the Marvels will be even a bigger loser if even the highest projections are true. Forbes reported back in the middle of September that the film's production budget is $274 million. However, the report also notes that the film received a $55 million tax subsidy from the United Kingdom, bringing the net cost down to around $219.8 million. However, that was not the final report regarding the Marvel's production spend from the United Kingdom's government, and it also does not include post-production costs for the film. Thus, financial analyst Valiant Renegade predicted the production was likely $300 million, if not more. So even if you use this Forbes $219.8 million number, that which is the production budget, the film's break-even point is around $439.6 million, given the studio split returns with theaters when it comes to box office grosses. However, if you use Valiant Renegade's $300 million number, the film needs to make around $750 million or more. Given the low box office predictions from Box Office Pro, it's quite likely the film will be just another loser at the box office for the Walt Disney Company, Bob Iger, Marvel Studios, and Kevin Feige. To add even more perspective to this, a $75 million opening weekend, that's on the high end for Box Office Pro's high end there, is less than Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, the film with the sixth worst opening weekend in Marvel Cinematic Universe history. The film had a $75.8 million gross in its opening weekend back in September 2021. That movie only best Eternals, which did $71.2 million, Thor, $65.7 million, Captain America: The First Avenger, $65 million, Ant-Man, $57.2 million, and The Incredible Hulk, $55.4 million. And that's without factoring in inflation. If you factor in inflation, the only film at best is Ant-Man, which would see its opening weekend gross clock in at $74.3 million in 2023 dollars. That means if the film comes in any lower than their high-end projection of $75 million for opening weekend, the Marvels will indeed claim the worst opening weekend in Marvel Cinematic Universe history when you adjust for inflation. So as noted above, without adjusting for inflation, no film has had an opening weekend less than $55 million in the entire history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Looking at Box Office Pro's total domestic projections, if the film comes in on the low end at $121 million, it would be the worst performing MCU movie at the domestic box office without even factoring for inflation. The Incredible Hulk currently holds that title with $134.8 million domestic total without factoring for inflation. The worst performing film when factoring for inflation is Eternals. The film's $164.8 million gross in 2021, now equates to $187.2 million in 2023. That means that on the high end, the Marvels will just barely edge out Eternals if it hits that high prediction. And again, remember, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania came in way lower than Box Office Pro's domestic overall projections when they first put out their long-term projections. So it's not looking good for the Marvels. It doesn't look like there's really any hope for this film. I actually probably think that it's going to do worse than those even anemic projections that Box Office Pro is giving it. I think this is kind of the death rattle of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and they did it to themselves, and there's no one to blame but themselves for it.
Subscribe for more.